Let's get straight to discussing the climate issues of the day with a climate justice activist, Daze, Aghaji, and Sam Hall, the director of the Conservative Environment Network. There they are. Hello to you both. So a whole new generation have become involved in calling for action to tackle the climate crisis. Young people will be the most affected by global warming and are demanding change. We've seen them protesting today. But how important is the role of the youth movement in tackling climate change? Daze, let's start with you. What do you think?
Well, I think it's fundamental. I think we are the generation that will be facing climate change. And not only are we the generation that will face it, but we are the generation who have the vision and the inspiration to continue to fight it. There is something about young people, and not even young people my age, but young people like children. They have a really amazing way of seeing the world in a way that seems quite black and white. Like, for example, I used to teach in a primary school, and I told them about fossil fuels. And they went, Daze, that doesn't make any sense. And I went, what do you mean it doesn't make any sense? Then they said, no, that whole process doesn't make any sense. Why would we be doing that to our Earth? And I went, good point. It doesn't make any sense. So it just shows like the clarity in understanding that young people have around how our system is toxic and it shouldn't be this way. But then also going into how we have the hearts and minds to openly vision about the world we should have and the world that we do deserve. And I think that's what you're seeing on the streets today.
Sam, what do you think? Do you think they're any different from the likes of Insulate Britain, for example?
I do think they are different, actually, and I think the youth movement does play a really vital role, particularly as Dave said, because ultimately those of us who currently work in politics and are working on climate policy, we have a profound responsibility to future generations to hand on a planet that's in a healthy and safe condition for those future generations. So it is for the benefit of young people predominantly that we're doing this. I also think there's economic opportunities for young people if we can develop the clean technologies and the green industries that we'll need to reach net zero from all the green jobs that we'll be creating across the country. Some recent research came out this week actually showing that there's a pay premium for green jobs, which I thought was really striking. But yes, I think to your question about whether they're different from, say, Insulate Britain, I think they are different. I think the tactics that they use are much less disruptive, much less counterproductive. I think they are focusing much more on highlighting what the science says and making the moral case that this current generation has to step up and tackle this challenge, rather than, as I say, these disruptive protests that I think alienate a lot of kind of middle ground voters in particular.
Daze, if you look at what's happening in Rome today, the G20 leaders are there. They're going to come up with some sort of agreement, we hope, about climate action going into Glasgow. But the youth movement, they don't have a seat at the table there.
Yeah, I think the idea of having a seat at the table is something that we all need to discuss, because young people don't have a seat at the table. Vulnerable frontline communities don't have a seat at the table, which tends to be ethnic minority people and people from working class backgrounds. And in this COP, sadly, because of COVID and vaccine apartheid, we're seeing less people have their deserved seat at this table. Where are the Indigenous groups? Where are the delegates? Why aren't we making decisions, not just as governments, but as communities, as a civil society? And the interaction between civil society and COP has been sparse so far. So there is that kind of question of not just young people, why don't we have a seat at the table? But entirely, why do people who sit on the margins of society don't have a seat on the table when we are the first to be hit by climate change?
Sam, what do you think? Do you think COP26 is going to be different this time around? It's going to be more representative?
I think it will do. I mean, obviously, it's incredibly difficult because of COVID to get lots of people to Glasgow. There are going to be limits on the number of people able to attend some of the Blue Zone events inside the kind of formal UN space each day, because we don't want to see a massive spike in COVID cases. Similarly, I think there are obviously issues as well with people travelling and having to undergo quarantine restrictions and also accessing what is a very busy hotel and an Airbnb market in Glasgow, which I think is proving very challenging. But I think the government has done everything it can do realistically within the space of in the constraints of COVID. It's made vaccines available for delegations coming from overseas. It's made some of the travel restrictions a bit easier to manage for some of those delegations. So I think given the difficult circumstances, it is as open as possible. I think there'll be a strong civil society voice there at COP to make sure that world leaders understand and hear some of these different perspectives as they hopefully come to an agreement in a couple of weeks' time.